Titan mains, it's okay. We have an endgame build for you that doesn't involve you using consecration or a melee focused build. Overall, we are still going to be using our melee here, but this is my Prismatic Titan endgame build. It has a lot of options, it has a lot of things that you can use to cater to your playstyle, and it actually covers all the champions in the game, and I think it's also pretty strong. It's going to be a pretty good setup in a fire team. It doesn't do too bad solo. I did run into a Master Lost Sectors being 29 power under, and also into Master Nightfall. Unfortunately, in the footage that you are seeing, attrition is active, and attrition isn't exactly the most fun modifier. It means that you kind of don't have any health regen. You're going to be able to jolt, you're going to be able to suppress, suspend, freeze, make sure you're also spreading weaken everywhere as well, and also using the new Titan super. It's a lot of fun. So let's jump into my Prismatic Shieldbreaker Titan build. So here we have my endgame Prismatic Titan that I'm messing around with, and as you can see, we're not using a melee setup in the more traditional sense with our aspects. So you can rejoice Titans if you enjoy punching, then there's plenty of other builds that we can go into, but this one is specifically designed to get ourselves overshield and also a bunch of weaken, be able to control, and this can actually cover all of the champions in the game on one build. It's really strong, and with the right team composition as well, this will be able to support people a lot. So first of all, let's go through our aspects. Dringer's Lash is going to allow us to suspend targets when we use it. This is great because then we can turn them into tangles as well, which we'll be utilizing with the artifact mod that we have. We also have Diamond Lance, which is our second aspect, which allows us to get 6 fragments total. And this will make, obviously, stasis lances for us to throw around. To freeze, we can also shatter them and then unstop champions with it, which is really good as well. We are running Suppressor Nade in this build. You can swap this out for Pulse Grenade purely because of one of the fragments that we're running, which is Facet of Dominance, which allows our Void Grenades to weaken and also our Arc Grenades to jolt. Suppressor is already able to stop Overload champions, but being able to weaken as well is fantastic. And then obviously the added effect of Pulse Grenade, giving it a jolt too, is going to do more damage as well. For the melee, we're running Shield Throw rather than any of the other traditional melees that you've seen. This gives us a ranged melee, which is quite good, and it can also give us overshield as well. For our super, we're running Twilight Arsenal. This is actually a really good super to be using in kind of like champion endgame content, purely because when you throw your axes, they will pull all of them in and do a weakening explosion. You'll also leave a bunch of axes on the floor that you can use and consume those as well, which is fantastic. Your teammates can too. And the extra weaken is great. I'm not too sure how much weaken is that this specifically does. I don't know if there's a higher amount or stuff or anything like that. But if this is 30%, then fantastic. Even if it's 15%, still fantastic. But we're not going with any of the supers because this is going to just be able to be used at range. We're not using Hammer of Soul here because we're not really making anything explode. So there's no real need for the extra range there. But I think Twilight Arsenal is really underrated and I would recommend using it. For our fragments, I've already mentioned Facet of Dominance. I would also take Facet of Protection because this is going to give us more damage resistance, which we already have a lot of with Overshield being created all the time. But this also, when we're Transcendent and we're using our Electrified Snare, is also great as well. This is going to stun and also suspend targets. This is just even better to have the protection as well. We also have Facet of Dawn for the constant uptime on Radiant, and also when we power melee final blows, we'll make our allies Radiant as well, which is also good. And also while we're Radiant, any weapons that we don't have are going to allow us to do barrier champion stuff. Facet of Hope is the other mandatory one that you're going to need to have, because while we have an elemental buff, whether it's Radiant, whether we have Frost Armor, Woven Mail, Overshield, whatever, this is going to bring back our Dringer's Lash because we're going to be getting our Barricade back a lot more, which is fantastic. The other two you can swap in and out depending on what you want to do. You can drop Facet of Purpose. In this specific build, we would be getting more Overshield whenever we pick up an Orb of Power, which is great. You could swap your super out and get maybe more Woven Mail, or you could drop this and go with faceted balance if you're just doing like regular content, and be rapidly defeating targets with light damage grants melee, rapidly defeating targets with darkness damage grants grenade. So it's entirely up to you. Likewise, facet of bravery, you can swap this out for the same exact one and keep either or in, purely because facet of bravery gives our void weapons volatile, and our melee powered blows will give us unraveling rounds on strand. It's entirely up to you, but let's go through the exotics, because there's also 3 exotics that you can use to make this build pop. The main exotic I am using in this build is Second Chance. Second Chance is a highly underrated exotic that I've used in a build way back when we had Void 3.0 and it came into the game. This will now allow you to apply Weaken when you throw out your melee, and you also get a second charge of shield throw as well. You can also stun anti-barriers with this, so you have 2 opportunities. And also, when you stun a barrier champion, you'll actually regain a melee charge. So if you just throw it and stun something, you'll get it back, which is absolutely fantastic in this build. There's another couple of options. As I say, if you don't want to run this, you can run Ambient Leap, and this will allow you to improve your Dringer's Lash. You'll get Woven Mail when you suspend a target, and it also, I think the Dringer's Lash sends out 3 of them rather than just the 1. I think that's the right thing I'm talking about. I haven't used this as much as I'd like to, but still, the Suspend and the Woven Mail is good. And if you don't want to run that, a really good exotic that you can run is Precious Scars, because final blows with weapon damage matching your super will make a burst of healing around you that gives restoration ×1 to you and your allies. So we are going to be using a void weapon for majority of this build, so you can take advantage of that there. That's when it comes to the exotics. As for the weapon setup, before we go into all the mods and such, Graviton Lance is fantastic for this. Elsie's Rifle with Repulsor's Brace is also great for this. You can run the Call for unstoppable stuff, or you can swap this out and go with like Arbalist and maybe put like another void weapon in here. But I recommend that like one of the best setups is go with the Core with Demolitionist, so you can get your grenade back, Graviton Lance, and then insert a heavy here. I have also been running this setup where I have even more Overload, and I have Thunderlord, so I can do even more damage to Overload champions. It's entirely up to you, and it will call for whatever the strike is that you are doing, but across the board you can cover all of the champions here: Overload, Barrier, and also Unstoppable. So let's jump into the mod. For this specific setup with what I am running, I'm running Dynamo, which reduces super cooldown when we use our class ability near targets. We have Harmonic Siphon. This can be swapped out, and this one can be swapped out for your Siphon mods. This is going to be good for generating our orbs. And then we have a Heavy Ammo Finder, because you're going to want to be able to get heavy back for whatever you're using. I am also speccing heavily into Strength. I've got about 91 Discipline just naturally, and then Recovery. So Resilience, Strength, and then Recovery, I'd say are the best ones. And then Discipline is already quite high for me. We go into our Second Chance. I'm running Heavy-Handed, just in case I get a melee final blow. It will create an Orb of Power. We have Momentum Transfer, which is causing damage with your grenade, reduces your melee cooldown, and grants class ability energy when you cause damage with a powered melee attack, so we can get our class ability back a lot quicker. We could swap the Heavy-Handed and go with Impact Induction to get our grenade back even further, or double up on Momentum Transfer to get the added effect there. On our chest piece, Resistances, you can run 1 copy of Charged Up if you want to get extra stacks, but it's not necessarily needed. But I have got stacks on my boots with Invigoration and Recuperation, purely because then every time I pick up an Orb of Power, I will get at least 2 stacks, which means I can go into the loop that we are going to be using those stacks with Utility Kickstart. I also have Reaper on here for more orb generation. You could even drop the Reaper if you really wanted to and double up on Utility Kickstart to get it back even faster. I'll have to do some testing with that a little bit more, but this is the setup that I have right now, and the last one is Outreach. For our artifact mods, the only real difference that you need to pay attention to here is that we have dropped Galvanic Armor, because we aren't going to be doing anything with Arc. If you do, however, use the Jolt Grenade, then you're going to want to have this as well for even more damage reduction. I have Threaded Blast to be able to do those explosions. I also have Overload Sword, but you could swap this out and put Elemental Siphon on. I have Counter Energy, which is fantastic when you're in a fire team and when you're by yourself. When you stun a champion, you'll gain energy back for your least charged ability. This is great in teams. This is going to allow you to constantly have uptime on your region. Radiant Orbs, whenever we pick up an Orb of Power, will also be Radiant as well, so constant uptime there. And this is the reason why we have Weaken, because every time we kill something that is weakened, we're going to get a Void Overshield. And that also pairs nicely with Expanding Abyss, because all Void sources will deal increased damage to weakened targets, which is fantastic. And then combine that with Shield Crush, having Overshield, having Radiant is going to give us our melee back, and also increase the damage of both our grenade and our melee. Fantastic setup. Let's talk about a live demonstration of the build. So the footage you're seeing on screen is going to be a combination of the Master Lost Sector that was the Exodus Garden, and also the Master Nightfall for the week that's just gone, which was the Disgraced. And the way that this build works is that you want to get into areas to hit a bunch of enemies with your shield throw to begin with, and then when you can start stranding things up and getting the call to explode things with the tangles that you've made, you can then work on champions. Like soloing a champion down is going to be pretty easy, but if you've got other enemies around it, it's going to be a little bit of a problem, especially when it comes to the barrier servitors that you ran into quite a lot. The other problem I had was dealing with overload champions, which was the fallen captains, and that's not because of the build, that's because they like to teleport all over the place. But the core loop is you'll be throwing out your shield charge to break the champion shields when they're up, or using your pulse rifle, using your weaken grenade to also stop the champions, the overload ones specifically. And then if you are going to go up against any unstoppables, you can use your Stringer's Lash to keep them up in the air as well. And then when you get Transcendence, you can spam the loop out. You can spam your grenade out. You can throw 2 melee charges, get your grenade again, and actually keep the uptime on the grenade too. So you're just going to be able to destroy everything. And when it comes to weapon setups, you can go with whatever fits the needs. You don't have to use the call here. You can use a different exotic if you really wanted to. You can use Graviton if you want to. You can use Elsie's rifle with Repulsor's Brace like I was. Thunderlord, there's a lot of options and it gives you a lot of flexibility with this build. I will say it does fall down a little bit when you are playing solo because it doesn't have that massive burst output that some of the other builds have, but I think it's very well rounded and it fits the neutral game and ability to play a little bit safer when you are playing with the build. And in a fire team of 3, I think that this is going to hold up very well because you're going to be able to weaken a bunch of enemies for your teammates. They're going to be able to help you out, and then the loops of you combining your builds together is going to be great, and that's what I love about this build. So sorry it's taken me so long to get around to making another Titan build. I've been having a lot of fun with the other classes, but expect more in the near future. If you want to check out this build, go and check out the link in the description for the dim link. Thank you if you've been watching the video to this point. Leave a like on it if you have enjoyed this. Subscribe if you are new. And as always, this has been It's Jimbo, and I'll see you guys next time.